Thank you, Liv.
Focus, Sarah Key, focus.
Okay, here we are.
Oh yeah, can we make it official now? Sarah Key, author, welcome to Life in a Garden Online. It's fabulous to have you here. That's where you say thank you for having me, Mandy, and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for all of you for coming. And what would I do without all my people who encourage me and keep me going, and my support group? Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, thank you. I appreciate it too. You make me look successful tonight, so thank you very much. If you have any questions for Sarah Key, author, please can you just pop them in the chat box. It is open, and I will relay the question to her. Preferably don't speak over us, but we will open up later if anybody wants to. Oh, Kerry has wine. If anybody wants to...
I also have wine. I was supposed to buy you all loads of bubbly at this party, remember, and now I'm sitting here and some of you have run out and you're going to watch me drink. It's terrible, but I'll just have to calm my nerves.
Yes, the advert said free shampoos.
That voice.
I know, you were supposed to get bubbly, of course, at this party.
Right, let's start the party. Deborah, mute yourself. Stay in the muted corner, please. If you have a comment, type it. I'll read it to Sarah, okay? Sarah, how's it? Thank you for joining us tonight. As I said earlier, it's fabulous to be reading, it's fabulous to have read Whales of Smoke, your 5th book. Fancy that. This one posed a bit of a challenge for you, I believe.
It really did. I think part of it was because I'd written a trilogy and I'd got very used to those characters, and I sort of had ideas
Sarah?
about where they were going to go to next. My ideas are always extremely vague, but my internet's unstable.
Yeah, you need to, Livy needs to get off. Okay, you need to reduce. Sorry, Livy.
Okay, sorry.
Tell her she can be in the same room as you. We don't mind.
Okay. Is this any better?
Yeah, it's improvement. I'll let you know, but otherwise we're pulling too much. I had the same.
Okay, sorry, that's a problem, obviously. Okay, so yes, this book, obviously before I'd had the trilogy and I had all those characters and I had a vague idea of where they were going next, not too clear. But in this, I lost them all and finished them off. And in this book, I had to start afresh. And I think one of the greatest challenges of this book is that I chose to use a lot of characters that I didn't necessarily have that amount of knowledge of. So a lot of the characters in this book are African. And I have written African characters before, but I had less reference points and less kind of hooks to put in, and so I had to work extremely hard. And then, as usual, I'm a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants. I don't plot properly, so I took off on various tangents that just didn't work. So I think this book took me 2.5 years to write, which is my longest book by far.
That's a long stretch for writing a book, but not as long as Lauren Bucas took, 5 years for Afterland. So you're doing well. You're doing better than she did.
I felt better when I read Fever, when I read Dion Mayer's Fever a few years ago, and it took him 5 years to write Fever. So, I've always written other things at the same time. I usually started other books while I had one on the go, but this book, none of that happened. And then of course it went to edit, and that process took almost a year because my editor is quite slow, and then it just came back with problem after problem after problem, and then it would have to be fixed, and it would go back, and it would sit there for for a month, and then it would come back this side, and it would require a month of work. And so it's actually a great relief to have it done and dusted.
Have you started a new book?
No.
That was quite emphatic.
I have some short stories that I wanted to write, but I'm looking for a bit of paid work, at the moment, and I'm writing some learning material. So I've returned to writing adult education material, and it actually just is so much easier to write than a novel. So we'll see, I mean, my books start because some social issue grabs hold of me and won't let go. And in COVID times, I'm sure I could find a million issues to pick up on now. But one of the major ones is violence and abuse. I don't like to use the term gender-based violence. I really try not to use that term. Obviously, women bear the brunt of violence and abuse. But there are numerous people who suffer all forms of abuse who are men as well. So this book kind of came at a time, I mean, I started to write the book because
Sarah, I'm losing you again.
Thabo Makuena. Okay, what can we do?
Sarah, I'm losing you again. Sorry.
Yeah?
You're in the wrong spot.
Okay.
No,
You can't hardwire your laptop into your router, can you?
You can, but then she's got to move. And she shouldn't have used this link.
Sorry, I'm trying another.
So while Sarah's sorting herself out, I'll just regale you with Mandi nonsense. This week we're discussing a whole lot of books. In fact, there are about 5 or 6 books lined up for this week. Sarah, just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to go, girlfriend. So we're starting with Sarah Key, who looks very confused at the moment.
I haven't got a picture on my thing now.
That's okay, we can see you. But maybe you're using
Okay.
less bandwidth maybe that way. Okay, I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
Okay, so where were we?
So yeah, so I started to write it about gender-based violence, about transgenerational sex, which is the young, blessies and blessers, and I finished at a time when actually the topic and the theme couldn't have been more pertinent. So kind of worked out in a way. And so I haven't kind of been hit by something. So my first book was human trafficking, was what I needed to talk about. This book was violence and abuse. So that's generally what the premise that I start with. And I don't know much more than that when I begin. So I think the reason I haven't started another book is I don't have that kind of theme that comes to me and just grabs hold and won't let go.
I think we should pick on skinny people next.
Okay, well,
because fat lives matter, right?
Yeah. We're getting the tech team in to help.
What else fails? Hello.
You have to. Okay, thank you. You have to be 16, right? Thank you. Okay, sorry for all these nasty bits of whatever. Right. Onward.
We'll edit them out. Just joking. We won't edit anything out. Okay, are you back with me?
Yes.
Do I have your undivided attention?
And I can see my people again. Yay, okay.
Sarah, now that you've distracted me completely, let's talk about the book. What is the basic plot of the book without giving away too much? Can we have a show of hands how many people have actually read this book so far? Okay, I can see one person on my screen at this moment. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Quite a few people have the book.
5, 6.
Does halfway count?
Halfway counts. Yes, halfway counts.
There's my cousin in Canada. Hello, cousin.
Okay, so you can at least, those of you who've actually read it will be able to give us a bit of input just now from your sides as well. That would be really nice. Thank you. Bit of water today. So that's fantastic.
The premise of it is that Sinazo Bayela, who is a village girl, comes to the big city, escapes her rural roots and comes to Alexandra Township, where she begins to work, and she's in contact with her older sister or half sister until such time as she sort of disappears. And the information that is available is that she has come up the hill from Alexandra to swanky Santon and has got a job as a hostess in a restaurant. So her sister, because gets some news from her and then is very concerned because there's just this absolute silence which has never happened before, and she feels the need then to come and look for Sinazo. So Nonhlanhla makes the journey to Johannesburg and tries to now find some people who have known her sister and to track her down.
Okay. Thank you. So now let's bring in the other social issues. So we've got township life, shebeen life, gangsters. What have I left out? Sex workers. No, not really. Just blessers. And modeling and bitchiness. So that's the human condition without any other sort of aspect there. What would you say is Sinazo's strongest trait? What's in her favor?
I think she's a survivor. You know, when you grow up in the kind of extreme poverty in patriarchal society, when your father beats you and you half starved, you actually are quite resilient to begin with. So I think that is in her favor. She is quite adaptable and quite desperate to actually escape poverty and make something of her life. So that is why she gets drawn into the circumstances she finds herself in, because what she wants to do is not be poor anymore, and she wants to find a better life. So that is what one of her motivating factors are. And she's naive. Obviously, she's naive because she believes in something that wiser young women would not believe in.
I think she believes what everybody else wants to believe, that, you know, you've taken a step in a better direction and things can only get better from now onwards. Unfortunately, in her situation, well, we all know how that ends. So yeah, not a great step, not a great direction to move in. Sarah, there's a question here. Janice wants to know what kind of books you read and what are you reading at the moment?
I read psychological thrillers and I read a lot of South African crime fiction, both true crime and fiction. And I'm reading Bloodstone by Erna van Zyl, I think, translated at this very moment. So it's also a thriller that's set on the international stage between London and Port Nolloth. And I couldn't really get into it, but then I got to the Port Nolloth part and she looked at all the faithies and all the little flowers that were growing, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it a lot more. So I really do try, you know, being in the book world, you meet people who give you their books all the time. So you land up reading. I read in my genre because I love my genre. That's what I like to read, and that's why I write what I write.
Before I ask you Kerry's question, if I said to you cultural appropriation, what would you say to me?
I haven't had a problem with cultural appropriation, you know. I know it's a tasty subject. I think you've got to do your characters well enough for them to be utterly believable. And I have written 5 books about, I actually don't really think, I've had some Indians who are very minor characters, but other than that, I live in South Africa and I draw from the fantastic cultural diversity that we have. I'm totally into African magical realism. I grew up, I got a beautiful book as a prize when I was about 12. It was African Myths and Legends. So I've always read that. I've always loved that. I use that in my work. I draw from that. You know, I just think you've got to make your characters as authentic as possible, and you have to have beta readers who are going to look at it. And so I've got very beautiful, hip young people who read my book and who say, yeah, I think this will go. I think it's, you know, realistic. I think it's okay. And I haven't really, thankfully, had any of those issues. And I've finally broken in. My book's gone to a lot of African book clubs. So I await the result of that. I did get one comment that some reader said, I started off and I was like, what's this white woman doing writing about black characters. And then she said, but then I got into the book and I really enjoyed it and whatever. You know, characters are characters, and it's how you sculpt them and craft them. And for me, no villains, you know, doesn't matter. My villains are the most terrible, despicable people. It doesn't matter what shade they come in. They're my favorite things to write. They women, they men, they do despicable things, and basically they are motivated. I try to paint a background of why people are like the way they are. So for this book, I used a lot of Mickey Pistorius. I read a lot of her profiling. I used that for Thomas and Darky in this book. And I tried to make them utterly believable, be they whatever cultural background they come from. You know, and I've also learned that your good character shouldn't be too good, and your bad shouldn't be too bad either. I think to create empathy out of your villains and to make people love good characters. I think when I began my first book, my good characters were so good. I mean, I could literally see their wings fluttering. And I've grown, you know, I know we're all, you know, if you see me on Facebook, you'll think I'm a paragon of virtue. You should try and live here with me. And my, you know,
Yeah.
did you hear the husband saying, here? You know,
Is there a mute button for Charlie?
I can tear around here. You know, that's the thing. We all have good and bad. And also part of the reason that people are so bad, particularly in our South African context, is that they come from this background of absolute poverty and deprivation and cruelty and starvation. And, you know, yes, we all do have choices as to who we can be. But sure, some people have the cards stacked against them in a very big way.
Which your lead character certainly did in her life.
Yeah,
I mean, look how it starts with them finding a serial killer in the middle of the bush, you know.
Well, that is the sugarcane murderer, you know. He literally, that is, Thomas and Darky is based on the Mickey Pistorius's guy who went off and 14 women later. You know, the poor cops, you just go and see what they found in those sugarcane field, body after body after body. I mean, as writers in South Africa, we don't have to draw too much on our imagination. You can just read true crime. You can read hitmen for hire. You can, you know, and I read all that kind of stuff. So other prison breakouts. I mean, you know, in this book, other people might say, oh, that's absolutely, how could anyone get out of a prison? Well, 70, you know, people escape from CMAX in South Africa every year. They do what my characters do because I spend my time looking at how people escape from South African prisons. So for people on the other side of the world, they might think, wow, you know, this woman's got quite an imagination. No, you know, this is just how it rolls where we live. And as crazy as that is, it makes for interesting storytelling.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you Kerry's question. Do you find it difficult to write from an unbiased perspective? I think you might have actually covered it already.
Yeah, and I've learned, my editor has told me, I mean, she didn't really know much about me. In my first book, she wrote me a little sidebar that said, were you ever a teacher? You are rather didactic in your tone. And that whilst this is very interesting, we're not here for a political lesson. So she trained me out of that. She trained me out of trying to educate people about South African politics or trying to persuade people about, and I think I have got better at that, you know. Basically, she said, if it doesn't advance the plot, get rid of it, get it out. So now I have, you know, I have it only because I want to advance the plot. And I don't, you know, even bias, I don't know. My characters just evolve because I don't plan, and they do what they want to do based on how out of control they generally get. And the reason that they get out...
What are we doing?
Charlie's just cleaned the lens. Can you just leave? So the reason that they get into the situation that they get into generally because they get more and more out of control. So I love to make my villains completely spinning. By the time you meet them, they're already at the edge of being nearly gone. So Lucas Makubene in this book, you know, he's a tenderpreneur. He's been making weak steel. There's a whole lot of pressure on him. He's been doing cocaine. He's had a string of blessies. His wife's had enough. You know, here is a man now who can devolve the way he needs to devolve because of the lifestyle he's chosen, and he's getting into his 60s, and it's all, you know, the proverbial dwang is about to hit the fan. So it's not really bias, I don't think. He's just going to be my baddie, and I need him to be really bad, and I need him to escalate things, and I need this guy to break out of prison, because I need them all to come together in a moment of singularity so that we can sort out this mess. So I don't know. The bias factor, they just do what they do, and they kind of take on a life of themselves. Yes, they have a choice, and that is one thing that my books try to show, is that we, like for example in this book, actually one of my favorite characters was Naledi. Now Naledi chooses to be a blessee. She's in with Chaba, who's the minister, the DG, and she's a model, and she's very cognizant of why she's a blessee and what she's using it for, and she makes it work for her. You know, she makes it work for her, and she comes to her own realizations later on. But when I began writing her, I was like, okay, she's going to be the total bitch. She's going to be the total baddie. And then slowly she started saying to me, but hey, you know, I don't really like that. I'm not feeling comfortable with that. I need to get out of this. I see what a bad thing it is, you know. So then she finds a way to kind of redeem herself, or perhaps not. So it's just, yeah, it's a wild thing. I wish I could sit down and plot a book from beginning to end. It would probably make my life a lot easier, and I wouldn't wake up at 3 a.m. having written myself into a corner and ready to, I don't know, weep or run or jump or do something. But it's just the way it sort of evolves. They live inside me, they percolate. It's like a stew, you know. They do stuff, and you know, there's a couple of things that you can do. A couple of car accidents, which is a good way of writing people off when you're really at a point. But you know, in 5 books as well, how much more can you do? And it's got to be workable, and it's got to be believable. So yeah, sometimes the ones you want to, that are your worst in the beginning, actually turn around and become your characters that offer redemption. And it's just for me, an interesting process. I can't really predict what my characters are going to do.
Do they live inside your head? I mean, you've just spoken about Ladedi. She spoke to you. So do they actually have little conversations amongst each other?
I wouldn't go as far as say conversations. I mean, I wish I was one of those authors as well who was in the shower and a great idea came to you while you were lathering your body and whatever. So, but you know, she will, like Naledi, she suddenly thought, oh well, I've got a niece who's working in London who's 22, who's the same age as Sanazo. I mean, I didn't ever think about those things, but she started when I wanted to make her more empathic and try and, you know, get it to reveal another side of her. Then she sort of really blossomed into something that I didn't expect at all. So I suppose that's the magic of it, and I suppose that's why we continue to write if we write.
Sarah, you mentioned something earlier, magical realism. What is that?
So that is using sort of folklore, and I was lucky enough 2 years ago to do a panel at the South African Book Fair. And I was given 4 authors who were all African authors. So there was a wonderful man from Angola. He wrote sort of parable type stories. And then there was a woman who wrote the most marvelous book, The Theory of Flight, and which was sort of an analogy using mythical African creatures and symbols and characters to kind of bring an element into the story that is almost supernatural. But obviously it can't be done in such a way. I don't write fantasy. I don't read fantasy. I mean, fantasy is huge. You know, I have friends who are brilliant. They write about elves and dwarves and dragons and winged things that fly, and they create other worlds and nether worlds and whatever. For me, it isn't that. But drawing on belief systems that people have that I believe are extremely potent to the way that they see the world and the way that they shape their own reality. Helps. So in this book, you know, Lucas Makubena, he feels that the Tokolosh is with him from time to time as he's living his sort of drug-fueled, rampant life. He sort of feels a presence there, and he feels he must go to the witch doctor. He feels he must get help, because we live in societies where there are plural belief systems, and people go to different healers and different helpers, and that is real in people's lives, and that allows them to make sense of their world. So I've always been very interested in that, and I build that into my books because it brings a lovely lyrical quality. It allows me, so in Tangled Weeds, my first book, I used Mujaji, the Rain Queen. It allows all these beautiful things that are so, indigenous knowledge systems that also I want people to understand about Southern Africa, because they are so great. And they also allow you to bring in certain levels of magic and supernatural elements that can allow your characters to behave in ways that they would because of their belief systems, but that also increase the perspective of people reading the books to actually understand that people have these different systems that they draw on, and that's also okay.
Okay. I wasn't sure quite when you were going to pause for a sip of wine there, Shamini says,
there you are.
Shamini says we should all be able to write about, and as anyone, we are all human. Debs actually typed something. She said, do you ever consider demographics when you start writing, or do you write the story irrespective?
I write. And now I've got to that point where I just write for me. Honestly, I write for me. It's my challenge. You learn, you write your first book and half your family members don't read it and no one's interested, and people promise you they'll read it, and people promise you they'll pay for the book or whatever, and they do none of the above, and then you go through that crushed thing and you disappointment, and you work for, I've got to that stage where the story is my story. It's my biggest challenge to get it into a shape where it's okay, which is why I might not write another book, but because it's just a personal thing. And I don't consider anything. I don't consider how it will sell, who will publish it, who will whatever it. I just write these stories because I have to write them. And for me, that's, then get another paying job is my advice to writers. Do something that'll pay the bills, and then, it's like just my genre. And my genre is not particular. If you can write fantasy or you can write other things. At one stage, it was that erotica that then got taken off Amazon, all that from 50 Shades onwards. And then now it's romance. It's, you can look at all the demographics. But for me, I'm a psychological thriller crime person. That's since I was yay high and I listened to Squad Cars on the radio.
Squad Cars.
The only thing I watch. The only thing I watch is crime and a bit of gardening and cooking. But otherwise, that's my go-to place. So for me, it's just not, never say never. Maybe I'll write something else.
I have no doubt there will be another book. Listen, I might not write another book. Bullshit is nonsense. So there will be another book. I have no doubt. Mary Ann also said, hello all, wonderful to participate.
New York.
Marvelous, she's not here anymore. Marvelous launch, though I cannot participate as the audio is inoperable here. Cheers, Sarah. Please excuse the typos as I'm typing with one hand.
That's my friend from New York through my book group. So thank you, Mary Ann.
Right, Gabby says, a fourth body has just been found on Tuesday in the KZN sugar plantations. Really echoed the start of your book. Felt such parallels listening in KZN News and reading the book.
We've got more serial killers here than anywhere in the world. And what they do is just beyond. But let's keep it cheerful. That's just a very short little bit at the beginning, and I don't go into a lot of gore, so you can just sort of get the gist and move on. Don't let it put you off too much.
It's a short bit at the beginning, but the theme continues throughout the book. Because he doesn't go away. He's around. That nasty piece of work doesn't leave us.
Yes. Well, always resolved in the end, is it not?
Are there characters that you get totally involved with and struggle to let go of? That's from Jessica.
I can't wait to let go of them. And like even now on this launch, trying to remember what their names are and what they did. Once I finish a book, my editor has almost, like I'm literally crawling towards the whatever. So I do let go of them all. And I must say, I can't remember a lot of things about my other books. I can't remember some of the characters' names in them. I can't remember what they did too much. I think because you're just looking for the next thing and thinking about something else, and the relief of having kind of completed it and resolved it is so great by the time I do, because I have to work so hard to fix them, it would seem, that they don't really live with me. And it's cathartic, particularly my earlier books when I wrote about people I knew and I was trying to resolve those issues. Now I like to finish them all off. I mean, I actually started writing this book with the intent of killing off my protagonist at the end. But my oldest beta reader, who is not here, Alison, because she can't work Zoom, got towards the end and she just said, that is absolutely not happening. You cannot do that. That is whatever. But I was like, how many times can your characters get out of these scrapes? You know, it doesn't work. It doesn't always work like that. This one has to go. Anyway, she said, it is absolutely not happening. She is not going. But I wrote the whole book with the intention of having her go. And I think that made it better. I used to cry my way through some scenes because I was like, you are the sacrificial lamb. You're not going to make it. Woo! You know? And I think that kind of helped. But it would have been, if I read a book and they kill off your main character at the end, you're like, come on, that is just not okay. But I did write the book with that intention, which I think in a way gave it, I hope, in places, more kind of sensitivity than it would have otherwise had. But yeah, so your characters, yeah, I can't say that. You know, I think I live such a full and happy life that I do these dark things on the side, and then they almost need to be let go of, because you can't live your life, you know, with all this horror that you create. I kind of create and then I give it to you guys to have a little bit of a blitz on and read on and whatever, and then I'm done with it, and then it's kind of what's next.
What do you like to live with when you're writing? I mean, what does Charlie think about you when you're writing?
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question. Was what am I like to live with?
Yeah, what do you like to live with when you're writing?
I'm a hell when I'm not writing, and I'm a hell when I'm writing. So it doesn't matter. If I'm unhappy and I'm having a miserable time, then everyone knows about it, you know. So
everybody else is having a miserable time too. Is that the idea?
Sometimes I'm thinking, oh my God, this is magnificent and whatever. And at other times I'm just not writing and I should be writing. So I'm stomping around the kitchen, throwing Tupperwares that people have lost the lids to. And I don't know, you know, writing looks far more glamorous when you watch movies on TV and someone's got a little cabin there.
Thank you, Charlie. Now we know what the truth is.
So I think it's, you know, it's like anything. You have to work. You just have to go to work and you have to sit there and you go through stages where it happens and it's great and you feel better. But there's no one to blame but yourself when you're not writing, and you should be writing, and you watching other people who are getting so successful, and then you get it's just an angst-ridden process, which is why I think I've come the full circle back to now. This is my challenge and I have to write it and I have to be happy with it and I have to be proud of it. And beyond that, you know, but I think it helps to have a lot of other things to do, and, you know, to not be overly invested, and to understand that it's a total process, you know. And every book you kind of think, okay, now I've got it, this one's going to be so good. You send it off to your editor. I mean, my same editor's edited 5 books, and suddenly it's like, what the hell happened? The passive voice is everywhere. You know, you concentrate so much on making now your dialogue natural, because she's been telling you, do people really talk to each other like this? 50 times in the comments bar. Now you think, okay, I've done it. The dialogue's so great. Now she comes back with, oh, well, massive problem with the passive voice. So whatever you're doing, and however many books down you are, you're making mistakes. I don't know if other writers are cleverer and have just learned, but with me, every book that goes there comes back fraught with another 70 issues. And on you go, on you bang away. You've got to be a bit masochistic, and you've got to be totally bloody minded, and you've got to be absolutely determined, and you've got to be one of those people who just will not give up to write. Well, I find those are the kind of personality traits, probably for worse, that have allowed me to complete what I've started. But it does, not always bring out the beautiful personality in one, because it's a struggle and it's hard. It's like, if you want to write, it's like getting difficult homework every day of your life. It's like, if you want glitter, someone said, if you want glamour, get a pot of glitter and throw it on your screen, because you sit here and you slog and you're on your own, and you can't say to someone else, and your family are disinterested, they're all busy doing their own thing, and they're not, I mean, Charlie has read all my books, which is a major thing, because A, he doesn't read fiction, B, I don't think he wanted to know what he was lying next to at night, and the first few books were just, it was like, oh, that comes out of you, so that's very nice and whatever, but it's not his genre, it's not his interest, and it isn't for many people. So you have to just find your people who like what you write and like the way you write. But it's small, it's a small pool, and so you have to find it from within. It has to be your own passion, your own goal, your own determination.
Sarah,
yeah.
If you don't mind me interrupting your soliloquy quickly. Have you ever written the last chapter first?
No, but I can see where my books end. So what I start with is the social theme, and then I always know where they're going to end. So in Butterfly, when they were going to be on a bridge spanning the Zambezi, and there was going to be the showdown there. And in this one, they were going to be in Sandton Central in the penthouse of the Empress, and that was where it was going to be. So I don't ever write the end. My gosh, I don't even know who's in the book until I'm 3/4 of the way through it. I wish I wrote that way. Just not the way it works for me. Just evolves as you go along.
Debs would like to say something. Debs, what would you like to say?
Well, I wanted to comment on something, but it was a couple of issues back. In particular, I think the one question you asked about, what was that question you asked?
Which question, Debs?
No, that one, the relevant one.
The relevant one. Okay, well, do you want to think about it and come back to us?
No.
She's got the stage now. She's hanging on to it with
yeah, you see, you're going to cut me off, and then I'm not going to be able to remember what I wanted to say. I'm getting
Yeah, that's the joy of being over 50, my darling.
Sarah, I'm a bit protective about my Zulu-ness, and that social appropriation thing does bother me a bit. But I know you know the characters, and I know you do. So I see somebody just asked what kind of research you do. I know you do. You've lived and you've worked in that community, so you know quite a bit about them. But there are things that in reading what I've read so far, I'm about 3/4 way through, that there are things that, as your editor says, do they really talk like that? And I know for a fact there are a couple of things that my cousins wouldn't have said it like that. And that kind of worries me a bit. But I also listen to Tuli Modern, what's her name? This morning, the white icon, and all the whites are crazy about her. All the whiteys are crazy about her, and she spoke this morning, quite frankly and openly, about where she gets all her inspiration. And she spoke about being inspired by the vendor kingdom system. I can't remember all the fancy words that go with that. but she draws so much from the Venda rituals and traditions and all of that, and to come
Deb's point.
back to, huh?
Get to the
The
point.
point. Is there a point?
Exactly. Is there a point? Get to it.
No, but I've also noticed that you delivered quite a lot of books to Black ladies. All of the photographs would say, but if I look through all of this audience here, they're pretty pale.
Yeah.
And I can't quite get it. Do people read your books because they like the stories, or because of the setting? Because I like books that I understand, settings that I understand. So I that's why I asked about demographics. And it doesn't matter to you, but surely it should.
Okay, cutting you off right now. Sarah, can you answer that briefly?
Yeah, I don't know why it should. I mean, I do it for me. If you guys read it, it's a bonus and it's wonderful. But I've got to that point where I really write my books for me. So.
And we don't ask the fantasy writer if dragons exist at the bottom of the garden when he writes them. We just read
But
books.
yeah, look, I mean, look, it's true. I am not Zulu, so I have to do a good job. I have to, but I'm very excited that I have really managed to cross a line. I mean, there are, the audience is, I would have loved other people to come.
The audience is not only white, just by the way. It's multicultural this evening, and it's Jewish, just by the way. Just want to throw a bit of that in there, all right? So, yeah, you know what? We read for the pleasure of reading, and I don't think that the majority of readers sit and nitpick a book about whether this is how a Zulu would speak. You know, I will speak to you in one tone of voice, and I'm going to take Deb's on in another tone of voice just now. So, you speak.
I think the plot is also, if you vary, your plot has to be great as well. If you have, particularly in a psychological thriller, it has to move very fast, and your plot has to be seamless. And then you can get away with a few, though not very many, but a couple of things that will then not be glaring mistakes. I mean, I get to the end of a lot of thrillers I read, and in the last, even big names, you know, and I'm like, oh, is that really how you're going to wrap that up now in the last 2.5 pages? So, yeah, but I hear it. It's always risky writing about people who are not your own people. But I do it in all kinds of, you know, with all kinds of cultures. I mean, one of my favorite ones in The Starlit Tide was a half Khoisan, half blind, like gimpy dude that I created. And I mean, I loved him. He was so fascinating. And of course, he could bring in all the Khoisan stories and the mantis and the moon. And, you know, I write to showcase the amazing cultural diversity that we have in Southern Africa. That's another thing that I do.
Michael Stanley, who are both white, writes about their detective Kubu. He's Tswana, comes from Botswana. So, you know, and he drinks.
And McCall Smith. Look at McCall Smith with Ladies #1 Detective Agency.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what? It's fine. I mean, there are small nuances, as long as you can kind of keep it all together and you don't lose you don't throw the book out and say, I can't read this, because it actually is so much. It's actually far removed from the way things are. As long as those little errors along the way, or things that you wouldn't think, don't put you off completely.
Sarah, when do you write? When do you find the best time of day is for you to write? Is there a set one?
I usually write from about 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock in the morning, from 10 in the morning till 1. And then if I'm into it, a little bit in the evening while I'm between cooking. So that's what I like to do when I'm writing properly. The afternoons before COVID are usually driving around and doing stuff and busy with children and things. So that's my best time to write. Do
you have enough energy to write after Kerry's put you through the
mill? She gets me in the mood. She makes me run and jump, and then I can physically sit still with my dog on my lap and be at the keyboard.
Are you still lighting the candle and drinking the tea at the same time?
Oh yes, my candles are here burning now tonight. Yeah,
fantastic.
It's also ritual, and it helps you because some days there's nothing to cling on to, you know. You have a Yankee candle. I'm my family know, boy, that's my present, because that's, you know, I think Annie said your olfactory senses get used to when they smell. She told me this a few years ago, when your nose picks up this beautiful scent, you'll be inspired and able to write. So I'm like, okay, well, let's try anything. So I like to light my candle, and I have my tea, and yeah, those are my little sort of right. And I sit at my dining room table. Many of you know that this table was the table I grew up around, where I used to sit next to my dad at this table, and he would regale us with all his stories. So for me, the physical wooden table that I work on is the table that carries many, many happy memories for me. And I think in a way that kind of feeds me. So I write in my dining room for that strange reason. And also there's not too much distraction in here. It's probably, besides the busy curtains, probably sort of the least busy room in the house.
You know, one of my favorite questions to ask authors is to actually tell us about their parents or their grandparents. Do you have a favorite anecdotal story you want to tell us about Alison, since she's not here?
No, I mean, my mother's been restored in my life, but I think my writing comes from my father. And, you know, my father's been dead for more than 20 years now, but my father is the kind of voice that I hear. My father is the one who, when I was at varsity and doing English, I'd come home and we'd sit and go through Blake's Tiger, Burning Bright. And he really, you know, loved language. And then also here tonight is Jessica Ben. And Jessica was my Form 1 English teacher at St. Mary's. And she also gave me an immense love and appreciation of English. And she taught me drama. So those kind of people, more so than, you know, my dad, those kind of people who gave me a love of English and a love of language were, I think, that's why I continue to engage in this rather excruciating non-paying job.
Do you write better under pressure?
Sorry, do I write
better under pressure?
No, I don't do anything under pressure very well. I'm a total A-type, you know, like anally retentive person. I meet my deadlines long before they're due. Pressure for me, I just try and take all the pressure off. And really, with my writing, I have no pressure. So this book, I mean, I've just learned you can't rush these things. I mean, obviously, if someone said we'd love to publish a top book next year in April, I probably would adjust to pressure. But because it's my own thing, I don't have pressure, and I don't have to write every day, and I don't have to do that. You know, I just have to see the project through. So in terms of what I do, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I pace myself, and I just, you know, the sooner I finish, for me, the better. But it could go a hell of a lot faster if I had deadlines and targets and those kind of things.
What inspired you to start writing?
I've always wanted to write. You know, I think when I was 11, I went